Hello lovely kindred, mortals, welcome in. I'm Syrinx, I'm a cosplayer, a TTRPG player, and a LARPer, and in today's video, I want to tell you a little bit about a LARP I went to, specifically a vampire LARP. Now before we get into it, what is LARPing, you might ask yourself? Well, LARPing is dressing up and playing pretend with adults, where you get together for an evening, a weekend, or even a full week to tell and experience an immersive story together. And this time, I had the pleasure to once again return to Darkness Atlanta. Darkness Emergent is an immersive experience featuring the largest and most dynamic Vampire the Masquerade LARP, tabletop, and community celebration in the United States. As I did in my previous video where I covered my experience at Darkness Emergent in LA, which you should definitely check out, I will once again be splitting this video into about two parts. In the first part, I will tell you a little bit about the structure of the LARP itself, and then in the second bigger part, I will tell you about the story I went through during the LARP itself. On to part 1, an explanation of Darkness Emergent, the event itself. The event goes from Thursday to Sunday with 2 or 3 nights of LARP depending on your ticket tier, and the days are filled with panels, TTRPG tables, or even some side LARPs. Each night there was also an after-hours event. So on Thursday evening we had Serafin Club, which was also an opportunity to roleplay if you wanted. On Friday evening we had the 7th Tradition LARP, and on Saturday evening we closed everything off with a karaoke evening. I personally love the way they structure these events. I've heard great things about the side LARPs even though I haven't been there myself, and this time around during one of the days I got to assist the lovely photographer Diablery Visuals on an off-site photo opportunity. Now having the days off means that you get to relax if you need it, or you can get to know the community outside of the game, and you can even calibrate scenes for the night to come, which is what I mostly did with my daytime. Now that you know a little bit more about the event itself, let's get into the story time, and buckle up because this is going to be a long one. Once again, I had the pleasure of playing Aida Volkoy, my beloved Ravnas from the Marshall Coterie in Chicago, although this time I was flying alone because my coterie mates could not make it, so I made some other character ties in advance to prepare for the event. I made a little group with my lovely friend Rachel Cordell, who was going to be playing a new Malkavian character called Rowan, and I once again teamed up with Bully, who was once again playing Toledo, just as he did in LA. And the three of us formed this twisted, dysfunctional kindred family, who you will be following for most of the weekend as I tell my story. Night 1 starts off with the Meet the Authorities event, and the elevator doors open to show me a huge gathering of kindred, among which I immediately recognize one, namely Rowan. She was already present here before me, and I spot her dancing among other kindreds. When I approach, she immediately comes up to me and immediately hits me with the, "Oh, you're here. Hi, I've been making friends, and they've been telling me that eating people is bad. Is that right?" What a way to start the weekend. See, when Ida met Rowan, Ida was kind of diablerizing her sire, and Rowan happened to walk in on it. Ever since then, Rowan has been traveling with Ida to find a new home for her. Totally not a dysfunctional mom-daughter relationship. I basically tell her, "It's not bad, but you shouldn't do what I do." We walk off to the side a little bit and spot Victoria Ash, who Rowan immediately says she is enamored with, because she has never seen a kindred as beautiful and elegant as her. Of course, Ida had already seen Victoria Ash back in LA, so they were already acquaintances. We stop and have a brief conversation because Victoria had just announced her blood marriage to Tigerius. Yes, that Methuselah Tigerius, who was played by Mark Meir at the event. I ask Victoria how she's feeling with her new blood marriage, and she says that it is mostly a political move, but she's also happy, to which I respond, "Well, how do you know if you're happy? Because all the emotions you've been feeling so far are fake, because you're blood bonded to each other." Personally, Ida is a little disgusted by this all. It's just a fabricated lie, all for the political benefit of the Camarilla. I really don't get the concept of it and find it actually quite appalling. Rowan, however, lightens the conversation by asking Tigerius if he's happy, to which he responds with a stoic face that he's extremely happy, and Rowan says, "Well, you look it. I love my daughter already." However, as we are talking, I spot a little mark on Rowan's neck, and I ask to see it. It looks like this pink and purple scarring all across her neck and also on her knees, and I ask her, "Well, what's this? You know, you haven't told me about this, and I haven't seen this before." And she says, "Oh yeah, well, it started itching the moment I came here, and I hadn't seen you in the past 3 hours, but I've only had it since then." I start freaking the fuck out. I'm like, I take this girl, who I kind of care for, to another domain to try and find her a new home, and in the first few hours we are there, she gets struck by this magical scar suddenly. Okay, this is not normal. I want this looked after. We're going to see the prince because the prince is also a Malkavian and they should know about anything going on in their domain. So we approach Prince Monroe of Atlanta, who is played by the lovely Bridget. I have to admit, I don't have the best first impression with Prince Monroe as we approach. However, when I quickly assure her that I have information for her that she would want, she starts listening. She takes Rowan's hands and calls for another Malkavian who is standing to the side, called Uriel. And as she takes Rowan's hands, she goes into this trance almost and starts talking about how she sees something looming over Rowan, taking an interest in her. I don't like the sound of that at all, so I say that we should immediately go find the source, since the prince also seems to not know what is going on or what this looming thing could even be. So immediately planning the next steps, I say that they should look for other Malkavians who have similar marks, and that I will go and talk to Tigerius, who, well, he's a Methuselah Banu Hakim, surely he must know something about an ancient looming being or the occult part of it. This is the first thing that starts working on my nerves, and as I start patiently waiting for Tigerius to finish the conversation he's currently in, I start getting a little anxious. Luckily though, I immediately spot Toledo a few meters away from me on the right, talking to some people. So I decide, what better way to alleviate some anxiety than to go kiss my lover. I had been avoiding Toledo up until now because he made me feel uneasy in a way, which I will go into a little bit later, but for now I decided I was worked up enough to approach him and kiss him in front of all the others. He did not expect it and reacted by saying, "Whoa babe, not in front of my clients," but I immediately rush off again and say that I will go talk to Tigerius. Talking to Tigerius and explaining the situation with Rowan, he offers to do a blood ritual to find out what he can, however he will need some payment for that. I gratefully offer a major boon for this and he gets to work. He inspects her and says that this is something ancient looming over her. It's even older than he is. He says that whatever is happening here is caused by blood sorcery and that the bond that it has formed with Rowan is a sympathetic one, which is very strange. He also says that it wants to devour her, which I do not like. And then he says there is nothing else he can do and says that we have his pity. Bitch! This makes me furious. Absolutely furious. So I ask if he as a judge finds it fair to leave a young one like Rowan to her own demise and that we don't need his pity. I'll let you know, I wanted to make him pay for saying that so bad the entire weekend. And I was going to do that by getting at Victoria and hurting her to in turn hurt him. However, I never got the follow up on that plan because I was just too busy the entire weekend. But I'll let you know, that bastard infuriated me. So the only logical reaction to that, of course, is to rush out of the room, infuriated, and punch the wall outside really, really bad. I actually hurt my hand out game as well. Once outside, I take a moment to regain composure, which has been very hard the past few nights for Ida. I just feel on edge. The last few nights, there have been too many gnawing feelings that I've never had to deal with before, and it's making my beast rile up. However, I'm not left alone for long as a woman I've never met approaches me. The lovely Kata approaches me and starts talking to me that she has heard who I am and starts asking how I feel about the justice that we as Ravnas get, or more importantly, do not get. She says that ever since the Week of Nightmares, no one seems to care about the justice for the Ravnas. I'm a little taken aback because I suddenly realized that I never interacted with another Ravnas outside of my own sire. I never truly cared for it, but now I'm faced with the fact that they also faced these horrible times and devoured other Ravnas during that week. I'm a little confused still as to why she approached me, and I ask her that, trying to again remain composed, and she says that she recognizes herself in me. More specifically, she recognizes the fury that she's seeing right now. Kara says that I can lean on her and trust her, which immediately raises my suspicion. Why would she be so nice to me? And why would the other Ravnas with her, Dimitri, also be genuinely nice to me and caring? They don't know me. Dimitri also approaches our conversation and hands me a coin, saying that with this coin I could get the unquestioned support of the Prince of Phoenix and his court, namely Ignatius and Camilla. Once again, I'm kind of dumbstruck as I don't get why they're being so nice to me and giving me this, and I act dismissive as they leave. There are too many goddamn confusing emotions going on, okay? We need to stop with it. No more emotions. After that, I find Rowan once again, and it doesn't take long before Toledo approaches us. Rowan introduces herself by saying, "Hi, I'm Rowan. I'm deceased." And Toledo immediately takes a step back back saying, whoa. I snap at him for that. I immediately snap at him for that reaction and say that no, she's not diseased, and whatever she has, he can't catch it. So he shouldn't be stepping away in disgust like that. Not to my baby. He doesn't know who she is because in the past few months, I haven't told Toledo about Rowan. So he asks who she is and why she's with me. I briefly say that I picked her up in New Orleans and she has been traveling with me ever since, and I leave it at that for now. Luckily, he's called away by saying he has to save the world or whatever. This is a perfect moment to give a little side note that Ida has never clocked the fact that Toledo actually does important things for the Anarchs. Back in LA, Toledo was a delegate in the Anarch side of a delegation, and Ida fully used him for that. Ida never clocked that Toledo is doing actually important things for the Anarchs. And the funny thing is, Toledo only got into politics because he wanted Ida to take him seriously, because in his mind, serious kindred care about politics. This is not the case for Ida, but it's so funny that that's the only reason he's been doing these politics and Ida hasn't even noticed. Before I tell you about the next scene that happened, a little rewinding, because earlier that night, Rowan and Ida were approached by a Ventru called Lucius, who was played by Caden. He had introduced himself to the both of us and had asked Rowan for a tarot reading, which is what Rowan does. When he introduced himself, he had blood all over his beard, and I asked, what's up with the blood? He responded that it was to send a message, and I responded that it was pretty weak to have to send such a despicable and direct message. I'm telling you, we got off to a great start. Ida doesn't like him. He seems like the kind of monster that will use and discard others if it benefits him. He just wants power and control. Ventru, am I right? Ugh. Anyway, moving forward, at this point in time, I spot Rowan being surrounded by a bunch of kindred, amongst whom is Lucius. My hackles are immediately raised and I go to listen in with heightened senses. Everyone seems to want to know what is going on with Rowan and with her mark, and Toledo is also amongst the group. Toledo starts saying things like, we all want to know the actual important stuff, right? And then proceeds to ask Rowan what her relationship with Ida is actually like. It was all quite funny to listen to, but then Lucius had enough and dominates Rowan to tell him everything she knows. The moment I hear that command go off though, I rush to the group. Outgame, there was an absolute hilarious moment here where I was standing close to them listening in. The moment I heard Lucius say that, I asked the guy outgame, hey, are you okay with physical touch? That was a little lacking on my part, I do admit, but the guy says yes, and I immediately rush off thinking, okay, I'm just going to push him lightly when I get there. However, we had never played before, so apparently while I was running away, the guy looks at the others and says, am I going to get hit? Not the case, please sweetie, not the case, but he didn't know any better. It was a very funny moment. I immediately rush in and push him away from Rowan and threaten him, saying that if he tries anything like that again on her, that I would make sure the blood on his chin wouldn't be the only I put on there this night. Toledo loudly tells him and everyone else to back away and scram, since this is a family matter. Another funny side note is while I immediately turned away and focused on Rowan, telling her, well, next time you don't look kindred in the eye, you look them just between the eyes on the bridge of their nose, and if you didn't like that he did that, you need to go up to him and tell him and make him pay for it. While I was doing that, however, apparently Toledo was behind me talking to Lucius and being very dude bro with him, telling him things like, hey dude, remember that's Ida that I was talking about? It would mean a lot to me if we didn't escalate the situation, and even more so, it would mean a lot to me as a friend if it looked like I was telling you off right now. Lucius apparently agreed, and that's absolutely hilarious that I did not find out about that or didn't even hear it. The three of us leave to go to the other side of the balcony, and Toledo asks why I have had her with me since New Orleans and why he doesn't know about her. I say that I am helping her out of my obligation to the tower, but he says, no, bullshit, I think you're helping her out of the goodness of your heart. And he even says, are you being good right now? This is making me feel incredibly queasy because I believe we cannot do any good. So I once again say, no, I had an obligation. And he asks, well, to who then exactly? Not wanting to answer the question, I immediately go in and kiss him and end the conversation there. He walks away satisfied for now, and the moment he walks away, I'd immediately turn to Rowan and I say, yeah, I did that to distract him. Some time passes, and after a while, Toledo once again finds Rowan and me outside on the balcony. He approaches us and immediately says, hey, That kiss back then, did you do that to distract me? I say, no, of course, I would never do that. And he replies with, no, yeah, you're absolutely right, you would never. And I retarget the conversation after that by starting to talk about Rowan's curse, upon which Toledo asks if he can mind read Rowan. He does so, but instead of only focusing on digging up information about the mark, he immediately starts digging up information about how Rowan and Ida first met. So he immediately sees visions of Ida diablerizing Rowan's sire and Rowan walking in on it. Focusing on the mark though, he does see some kind of pink and purple serpent wrapping around Rowan's head. Toledo stops mind reading and says that we should be a united front from now on, and asks what I want to do moving forward about Rowan's mark. I feel so bad and conflicted right now with him thinking we are a united front while I have been lying to him all these months now, making him think that we have been lovers ever since LA. So the only logical way to deal with this is by saying that I want to kiss him. He puts an arm around me and asks if I only want that to distract him. I get a little queasy again and say I need a drink before leaving. Keep a counter of every time Ida leaves an awkward conversation by just walking away instead of dealing with things. The end of the evening approaches and Toledo once again pulls Ida to the side with Rowan and says that he wants Rowan to do a tarot card reading for the both of them as a couple. I'm going to tell you, I felt like I was walking the line here so bad. And I was feeling so bad for Toledo as we were standing outside. He was holding me around the shoulder with an arm as we stood there, and I reluctantly put a hand on his back, getting a strange kind of comfort from it, even if I maybe didn't want to recognize it myself. But before I can analyze that feeling, or even want to, or before we get that reading, that night ends and we move to Serafin Club. We start Serafin Club off with Toledo and Ida dancing together on the dance floor. And I ask him why he's so good. He replies by saying that there's no reason for it, that's just the way he is. And he says that he also thinks I'm good and that he wants this between us to work out forever, because that's the whole point of it for him, for it to work out. I respond by saying that it always works out because, well, in my mind, every time I've been with someone, it was to gain something out of that, to use them for something. And so I always got what I wanted out of it, and it always works out. In this conversation with Toledo, I also find out that in every previous relationship he has had, he had been blood bonded to the other person. I tell him that those emotions that he had then were fake, but he doesn't want to believe it. And I say it's just like Victoria and Tigurius. He starts looking at me with just pure love in his eyes, and he says that this between us is so different to him and it works, and he seems so happy in this moment, feeling incredibly guilty all of a sudden and wanting to get out of this difficult situation with all this talk about emotions and this guilt I'm feeling. I tell him I want to kiss him once again, and he asks me if I want to do that or if I only want to do it to get out of this difficult conversation that we're having. I ask him if it matters and he says it does. So I say, then don't kiss me, and I walk away from him, leaving him on the dance floor. The fun thing about the scene is that it looked so different for an outsider because we looked like we were just intimately dancing with each other, while in reality we were having a really hard conversation and I walked out on him. So I walk away to find Vice. If you remember, Vice is one of Ida's exes and is played by Vin. I am feeling very anxious here right now, and I approached Vice asking him, after a little bit of reluctance, if he is the way he is because of me, if I caused that cynical side of Vice. He doesn't fully answer my question, but does agree that we are not good. And I agree. I say we cannot be. Finally, someone who agrees with me and doesn't make me feel insane. However, he goes on to say that I should know I can always ask him for help and that he does still genuinely care for me, which riles me up immediately. I ask him why he cares and that I'm sick of people constantly offering help with no apparent reason for it. What do they gain out of it? A debt from me? I'm once again riled up, so I back out of the conversation, saying that I asked what I wanted to ask. I go stand by the bar, pissed and confused, as Toledo approaches me. He says that he's sorry for talking about emotions that much because it clearly makes me uncomfortable, and says that he saw me talking to Vice, which seems nice, and asked what I was talking to Vice about. I say that I just needed to ask Vice a few things about why he is the way he is, and I explained that I don't think Kindred can do something nice for someone else if they don't have something to gain from it. Toledo starts getting a little closer and I immediately start feeling antsy. And responding to what I just said, he said, well, what did you have to gain from helping Rowan then? Why did you do it? I say I did it for the Camarilla. It's what I do for them. I clean things up. And he says, no, you just take out bad people. To which I respond, no, it's literally what I do. I clean up this society. He asks if that makes me feel good. And I say, it doesn't make me feel anything. I just do it. He says, well, you're not a robot. Surely you can feel things just as I can. To which I respond, well, have you ever thought that we're not the same? I stumble away from him a few paces and I say that whatever this is between us, surely it can work, but you need to get it in your head that we are not the same. Toledo also goes on then to ask if it's true that I had never mentioned him to Rowan before. And I say, yeah, it's not something that I immediately bring up in conversation. Do you do that? To which he says, yeah, true love is important to talk about. And the moment he hits that true love word, I get so antsy and I need to leave the conversation. I walk away fully on edge and I just need a corner to breathe, even though Kindred don't have to breathe. Only a few minutes later though, I see both him and Rowan round the corner with purpose in their step, and I think, I don't want this conversation right now. I obfuscate and I walk past them going outside. After a few moments outside, Rowan just rushes in and says, hey, I need you to blow on these cards. I just do it for her and she leaves again. But then a few moments later, Toledo finds me outside. He asks if I can go inside with him to do something that's very important to Rowan and to her cards. And I say, fine, you have 5 minutes, and I go inside with him. Rowan apparently wanted to read our tarot cards as a couple. As we stand by the table, Toledo puts an arm lovingly around me and I quickly remove it. I'm annoyed as I listen to her talk about how we'll have hardship together and a choice to make, questions that we're building up to but in the end we'll find justice. Toledo immediately starts talking about how this'll work and that we'll be a true power couple unlike Victoria and Tigurius. But I cut him off by saying if this is what he wanted. He says, well, we're just having fun, but I am extremely annoyed, and I say, well, you got your cards and you got your 5 minutes, and I rush off to the bar. And at the bar, I find someone else, namely Raphael, played by Ira. Raphael had traveled to Atlanta together with Ida and Rowan after they met up in New Orleans. And Raphael and Ida have a history that they shared during the Week of Nightmares, where both of them got quite close to each other and saw the raw and vulnerable parts of each other, which made Ida a little uneasy, but also unsure of what to do with Raphael, and she generally felt some kind of connection with him. Raphael walks up to me and I lean against the wall with him as he says that he has been hearing some rumors. Apparently that Toledo and I would be blood bonded to each other. I say that I don't care about blood bonds, and also I'm kind of tired of talking about emotions right now. He says that someone hired him to butt heads with Toledo if it came down to it, and I say that, well, he can do whatever he wants. Raphael goes on to say that he loves it when our true nature comes to the surface, and I silently agree with him, secretly wanting Toledo to face what he is and frenzy so he can actually acknowledge that he's also a monster just as I am. I say that Toledo wouldn't hurt a fly and that he wouldn't actually cause problems, so Raphael has nothing to worry about. As he leans forward, he says that luckily he knows me intimately and that he's looking forward to a little bit more fun. I see that at this point Toledo is watching us from the other side of the room, and I lean in closer to Raphael, kind of intimately, because I want to make Toledo feel a little jealous. Skip forward a little bit, and at a certain point I see that Raphael and Toledo are talking, so I go to listen in with my heightened senses. I only start listening in mid-conversation, but a funny side note is that before I started listening in, Raphael had been heavily insinuating that him and Ida shared a lot of intimate nights together, and in the beginning of their conversation together, Toledo was trying to be genuinely nice while Raphael was basically having a villain monologue. But the moment I start listening into the conversation, Toledo is basically telling Raphael to back off, that Ida has left that part of her history behind. Toledo asks if Raphael broke Ida's heart, and that is the reason why Ida is the way she is. Toledo goes on a rant and says that Raphael is the reason why Ida thinks all kindred are bad. He also says to stay away from Ida because clearly Raphael is a bad influence. He goes on to say that he will literally stop Raphael from approaching Ida if it comes down to it, and finishes by saying that maybe Raphael will become a better person after he watches and sees how Toledo fixes Ida. Yep, he said that. Raphael laughs in his face and says that he gets why Ida likes him, because Toledo is kind of adorable. He asks what Toledo is willing to pay in order for him to stay away from Ida. And Toledo goes on to say that he's willing to pay, but he's also willing to do this the hard way. And then Toledo finishes the conversation in the best way he can while Ida is listening in by saying, let's make a bet on it that I can change her. Rest assured, Ida took note of this conversation. This night ends with Ida at edge, ready to tear it all apart. She thinks that whatever is happening between Toledo and her is not love, they don't have a blood bond, and she doesn't need help or fixing, or she doesn't need anyone. Let Toledo realize how much of a monster he is, so that in turn, he can finally realize how much of a monster Ida thinks she is. The first night comes to a close, and after a little bit of relaxing time, the second night starts. The night begins by Rowan and Ida walking onto the balcony and Ida asking Rowan for any updates, if she's feeling anything else, if there are more itching places where marks appears, such things. And Toledo approaches them. I feel like so many of these interactions start with "and Toledo approaches them." Anyway, he wraps an arm around Ida and says, don't you think that Rowan should focus on other things than those cards, broaden her horizons? And I fully disagree with him, dislodging myself from his arm and saying that it's her thing, so she should just have it. I turn around to face him angrily and I say that, well, instead of focusing on changing other people, maybe he should focus on winning that bet of his. And I rush off to go find Raphael in order to make Toledo a little jealous. Funny side note here is that Toledo did not know that I listened in on them, so he thinks that Raphael went and spilled their entire conversation to Ida. I find Raphael a little bit further off on the balcony and I stand with him as Victoria Ash and Prince Monroe start giving speeches. Throughout all of this, I stand with my arm draped around Raphael's shoulder, tracing little circles, all the while making sure that Toledo is watching us. Yes, I'm petty. So what? After the speeches are done, I walk up to Rowan and start asking her a few more questions about her mark. However, I'm constantly annoyed by Toledo walking past us with Victoria Ash on his arm, clearly trying to make me jealous now. I meander off and I get pulled into an elevator because it's time for the Arsene Society to go do a mission. Now, if you didn't watch my last LA video, basically when you participate in Darkness Emergent, your character needs to be inside of a faction, which is a group of kindred that basically align on what they do in Unlife. My personal faction for Ida is the Arsene Society, which is all about underground stuff. So with all of my lovely fellow Arsene Society members, we go off to another building and go down to a staircase. It's time for a Mission Impossible heist, baby. We find out that Prince Monroe was going to gift a certain painting to Victoria Ash. However, that painting had been stolen and the Arsene Society had been framed for it. So if we didn't retrieve said painting before the night was over, we were going to get a lot of shit thrown at us. We find our way to a staircase leading down, and before we go into it, we see little red lines of an entire laser maze set up in this hallway. In front of it are 3 different plaques, and through some people who are very good at occult and speaking Latin, we solve the magic protection that allows us to now actually enter the laser trap. Everyone looks at each other as they say, well, someone needs to go inside and retrieve this painting at the other side, which we saw gleaming off in the distance. And everyone looked at me and said, well, you are literally dressed as a spy, so I think you're the best one to go. I sigh and I don't disagree with them, so I say, I'll give it a try. But first, we try some of our disciplines because, well, I can make illusions and I can make an illusion actually physically real once per game. So I try to put up a wall on one side of the lasers to try and stop some of the lasers from going through. However, we quickly notice that none of our disciplines work down here, so we're left to our own physical abilities to try and get through this. Taking off any inconvenient jewelry or clothing, I get ready to go through the lasers, and I succeed without a problem actually. It seemed a lot more intimidating, but once I was going through it, it went quite smoothly, and I got to the other side and got to the a painting. Again, a little funny side note here is that outgame I literally had to crawl through pieces of yarn strung out like an actual laser maze, and I had no idea how I was going to do that with my bulky wig and my bulky costume on. Storyteller said, well, if you hit it with your wig, I just will not count it, but I said, no, that's not good enough. So I actually took my wig off to go crawling through that maze, and I told everyone, well, in-game we'll just say I looked really cool doing this, but out-game I cannot do this with my wig on. So that is how I started the in-game rumor that Ida went through that laser maze doing naked backflips and looking really cool while doing it. I got to the other side, which deactivated the lasers and allowed everyone else to join, and someone with Sensi Unseen saw small letters on the side of the painting saying, if you want to gain something, you need to lose something. 3 other Unseen Society members happily opened their wrist and spilled some blood, after which we could just take the painting, and we left with a last message saying, this is not the last that you will see of me. So once again, the Unseen Society was apparently dealing with a mole or someone that was trying to test us. I feel like I've been here before. Anyway, this was a fun side mission for Ida, after which she safely put the item back where it belonged, and it was time to get back to solving the illness of her daughter and the mess of a relationship that she had going on. Once back on the floor, Toledo and Rowan quickly approached Ida, with Toledo looking all burnt and saying that he went to take care of the Second Inquisition. They both seemed hurt, but Rowan also started mentioning that Toledo was actually helping her with her mark. Ida doesn't believe a whole lot of that, and she's actually still feeling pretty pissed about the bet he made and that entire conversation with Raphael, so she decides to take another approach and starts flirting a little with Toledo. As they are standing there, with Toledo being hurt from the Second Inquisition and Ida also having gotten a little hurt in the Mission Impossible scene that she had, she wraps her arms around Toledo's neck and suggests that they should feed together, a thing that they had never done before. The funniest reaction to this was Rowan immediately raising her hands and saying, whoa, I do not need to see this, and Toledo saying, no, Rowan, you need to stay, you need to actually see this. Rowan, however, backs away and runs off as Toledo and I leave to go feed on his herd, who apparently all know Ida because he's been talking about her. Totally doesn't make her feel weird. During this feeding scene, Ida basically wants to remind Toledo that she is a siren predator, and also they are predators. As kindred, they're monsters and they should hunt. And she wants to just remind Toledo of that by being a little bit more aggressive with his herd than he would. But he once again has to bring up the fact that he thinks Ida is good, after which Ida gets furious and says that he should get it in his head that we are kindred, that we are monsters, and again, we are not the same. And he should finally maybe accept that. The two of them rush off back to the gathering and are bickering a little back and forward. And as we get back to the gathering, I see Helia, played by Vun, who I'd also already met in LA. They let me know something very interesting, mainly that Toledo had offered a life boon to her to get Raphael out of Ida's life. This sets me off, and I yell at Toledo saying to back off from Raphael because they're actually helping and being useful, and he right now clearly is not, because he's letting his emotions get in the way. You know, the things he feels constantly. We have a little bit of a direct, heated discussion there, but it quickly turns into this kind of comedic, indirect fight. Every so often, we would say a sentence a little bit louder so we were sure the other person could hear it. He says, well, we can actually maybe all help together, after which he gets an angry response from Helia, Raphael, and Ida saying, no, we are literally already doing something. You are not. This actually pisses Toledo off so much that he rushes away from the conversation. I go stand at another table a little bit later with Rowan, and apparently her nose is now also bleeding from this mark. Couldn't get any better now, could it? However, what I hadn't told you yet is that throughout the day, Ida had also gotten a little curse on herself from an unknown source. Basically, the night had started off with Ida hearing this kind of choir in her head that was getting louder and louder. Mirrors were fogging up as she walked past, and she felt all of her regrets and her sins building up and eating away at her. The only way for her to feel a little better and for the choir to quiet down a little bit was for her to actually confess or talk about one of her regrets or sins. Rowan and Vice had both noticed this, so at this table, Vice approached and asked, is everything alright? They used their occult senses to see that something clearly wasn't right with Ida, and Rowan reached out and touched Ida and used Spirit's touch touch on her. She indeed sees that some kind of curse is hanging over Ida and also starts to hear the choir. However, after the spirit's touch end, I ask, do you still hear that fucking choir? And Vi says, no, they can't hear it anymore. However, Rowan says, yeah, they can still hear it, meaning that in some way, this spirit's touch also meant that Rowan now was cursed with the same curse Ida had. Yep. Ida freaks out. She breaks the table they were standing at and rushes outside, trying to find this other Rathnos that had previously approached her, called Kata. She decides that she is so furious right now that even though she doesn't know why Kata was offering to help her, she's going to accept it because she doesn't know what else to do. She goes over, she explains everything to Kata, everything surrounding Rowan, the curse, the mark, and she just says that she accepts Kata's help. She doesn't know why she's offering it, but nonetheless, she'll accept someone else's help. The first time probably for Ida. Kata tells me to get my shit together and to calm down and says that she's on the case and she will see how she can help us. With this choir singing in my ear though, I drop a little something that I didn't want to drop and I say that I diablerized my sire. After which I say I shouldn't have said that. Luckily, only Raphael and Kata were close at that time and Kata says, yeah, you shouldn't have said that, but I'll forget that you did. She's being so nice to Ida, I don't know why. Kata walks off from that conversation and Raphael offers if I want to talk because clearly I have a lot on my mind. And I accept. We walk over to some couches on the balcony and sit down. We start talking about emotional stuff. And I explain basically how every single time I'm around Toledo, I feel this sinking feeling in my gut. I feel guilty, but Ida doesn't actually say guilt or whatever because she doesn't know how to name the things that she's feeling. She just says how she thinks some people like Toledo are so privileged in the way they were brought up and the things they have managed to feel up until now. They just assume that everyone else knows how it is to feel things like love, whereas Ida never really had, so she doesn't even know how to recognize that feeling, how to recognize the feeling of love or of guilt or of feeling sorrow for someone. She does maybe feel it and it's starting to gnaw at her, but she doesn't know how to express it in a good way. I see Toledo and Rowan talking on the right side a little bit further off and I decide to listen in for a second. I shouldn't have, because the moment I listen in, Toledo had just finished helping this other kindred and they were just gushing about how good Toledo was for helping them and how good of a person Toledo is. Back on the couch with Raphael, I just start crying, knowing that I'm using and manipulating a genuinely good kindred. The kind of kindred I swore to protect because I don't think they deserved to be in this unlife. Toledo is one of those, and I have been using him this entire time, and he doesn't know. Abbott, Toledo's Baron, comes in to check on us at that moment when he sees me crying and asks if I'm doing all right. I ask why he cares, and he says, well, because Toledo loves you, so that's why I care. I immediately respond by asking him why Toledo helps people like that, why he's just so good, but before he can answer, Toledo stumbles over to us on the couch. Toledo is really high from a little excursion he did with his faction, so he approaches the couch by just really out of character saying how much he loves everyone there, including Raphael, which clearly shows that something is wrong. Noticing that Toledo is really out of it right now, and in some way feeling so bad about the situation, Ida just invites Toledo to come sit with them, and she caresses his hair a little bit, trying to comfort him in a moment that he's clearly not in a right state of mind. The second night comes to a close, and Ida gets a little vision in between nights. Namely, she had been constantly pondering over this Malkavian mark, and she got a vision that showed a statue of connection, a statue of lovers that is about connection but also creates connection. Clearly, this tracks with whatever sympathetic bond this ancient being had with Rowan and the other Malkavians, and so Ida assumes that if they have this statue, this is literally what represents the connection they have. So maybe in taking care of that statue, they might break that connection. Taking that knowledge with her, we start the final night of the LARP, night 3. The third night starts, and it starts with Ida walking in with Raphael, basically having had a few moments to think about things that have happened, saying that she's decided Toledo needs to know the truth. And we all know that that is going to be a great conversation. I walk off to the bottom of a staircase staircase, waiting until I see Toledo. And in the meantime, I see one of the other Malkavians called Uriel standing there. So I talk to her a little bit about the mark. I ask if she has felt anything and what she thinks about everything going on. I also tell her about the statue and ask if she has seen that statue. Little do we know that at that exact moment, Lucius the Ventru walks in holding a statue of lovers. So immediately I say, hey, that's it. That actually represents your connection. And as the three of us stand there at the bottom of the stairs, we basically agree that maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to just try and break the statue and see what happens. Because, well, if the statue represented the connection between this being and the Malkavians, if the statue is broken, the connection might be broken. It might just be that simple. And it is. Lucius goes outside, breaks the statue, and I walk up to Rowan and I see that her mark has disappeared. So at least the connection part is solved right now. Surprisingly easy, although I don't know how hard it was to find the actual statue because I didn't do that. As that finishes up, I see Toledo walking by. So I approach him and I say I just need to talk to him for a moment and for him to hear me out. I start by saying that it's on him for assuming I can just understand all these emotions he's constantly talking about and just know how it feels. And he throws around these weird feelings and these words like true love and forever. And he says that he feels so many emotions, but they're all lies. It's all fake because everything between the two of us had been fake up until Atlanta. I'd been using him and manipulating him because he was useful, but now he's starting to get in the way. And he has to see how this makes me a monster, but also how this makes him a monster because all the emotions he's been talking about, they haven't been real. They've all been fake. And he needs to face the fact that he is a monster instead of flee from it. It hits a nerve with him. And he grabs both of my upper arms and pushes me back as he says, I am right. I am a monster. I am the most terrible monster. I am a horrible girlfriend. I'm a horrible person. And I'm a horrible mentor to Rowan. And I should stay away from her unless I want to make her like me. And if I don't stay away from her, he will make me stay away from her. Although I didn't notice it at the time, while we were having this very heated discussion, at least 6 people around the room tensed, ready to jump in when he got aggressive and grabbed me by the arms. He rushes outside before he can do anything else. And Helia and Raphael are next to me, asking what happened and how I feel. And I say, I don't feel good about this, actually. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I didn't expect it to go this way. We all know that's also totally on me and the way I phrase things. Our conversation is interrupted by someone else approaching and asking if I'm alright, to which I completely freak out and ask why everyone cares. And I rush out of there, going upstairs to just get away from everyone for a little while. Some time passes, and as a trial happens downstairs, where Tigerius was the judge and Toledo was one of the people on the defending side, I decided to just vaguely follow along, but then I saw Helia sitting there, and she asks me how I'm feeling, but she seems genuine about it, and I feel so confused that I just start talking to her about it. She explains to me that her and Raphael have a history, and that she actually loves Raphael. I ask her to explain what exactly it is that she feels when she talks about love, and she gives me the most beautiful explanation. She says that feeling in love with someone is feeling their absence when they're not in the room, when you don't see them at a gathering and you feel disappointed, which Ida does with Toledo. She asks that if I had something that would help Toledo further his goals and get something he wanted, if I had it, would I give it to him? And I say, yeah, I would. She goes on to ask a lot of other really meaningful questions and actually gives Ida something to think about, something to measure when someone talks about love. She herself, again, never experienced it, but someone clearly explaining several ways in which they feel love for someone else. Ida thinks and notices that she does feel some of those things for Toledo when they're around, and she actually felt really guilty about everything she had done to him up until now. I realize I feel bad when I think about never being able to see Toledo again, and so I genuinely thank her for the conversation, something that is totally unlike Ida to do, and I leave her, wanting a distraction from all of this emotional stuff. Luckily, the Arsene Society had another mission to go on. Earlier this evening, we had gotten a little piece of a subway map with the beginning of a message message written on it. All of the members agreed that we needed to gather all of the different pieces to make this entire subway map and figure out where we needed to head next for this mole. Gathering everyone and gathering this map, we found an X and we went to the spot, which turned out to be an abandoned subway station. However, as we got closer, we noticed that there were several robed figures patrolling around the area. Quickly, I teamed up with another Arsene Society member called Elodie, played by Brooke. We see in the distance that there is this plaque standing on the pedestal, and Elodie and I both have Beneath Notice, which is a way for us to disguise ourselves using presence and obfuscate and seem like people who are supposed to be in that situation. So the two of us form a duo of guards/occultists and start going into the routine with them. As we get close enough to the pedestal, Elodie picks up the plaque, and the moment she does, all the occultists start lining up behind us and start guiding us towards this huge door. The other Arsene Society members freak out a little bit and start attacking the occultists, not wanting us to open the door. Eventually, all the occultists are slaughtered and we are left standing there. And I agree with Elodie that we should maybe actually open this door. Around this door, we see 7 sigils of the 7 virtues. And after some people use their sight on the door, we get to a decision. If we leave now, we might leave this door locked, and that could be good. But if we leave now, there might be a chance that we don't get to stop whatever is inside this door. So it's a choice to be made. We also see the word Apophis, which after a quick Google search, Ida finds out is meant to be this deity of chaos, looking to devour. So she makes the link. Whatever is behind this door might actually be the source of what caused the marks on the Malkavians. So she doesn't want to leave this door just unopened. She wants to be able to take care of whatever is inside this door. We start performing acts to satisfy each of the virtues, which is quite funny for a group of thieves and underground people to be giving a coin to one another in order to perform the virtue of charity. The door opens and we find this occult priest all in white robes saying that they are the dust eaters. There is an altar there with lots of different little vials, and clearly he was trying to make some kind of concoction. As we talk to the guy, he's pretty chill actually, and he says that he is doing this because he wants to be the last thing to be devoured. He says it cannot be stopped, and it's up to us to decide if we want to open the doors ourselves and make this concoction. A lot of people start bickering, and I use this opportunity to blood bond the priest to me, after which I approach Elodie. I say, I think they will open the door, but I kind of want to get out here. We'll see what happens. Raphael was also there, so I'm like, I know whatever happens, Raphael will stay to the end, and I'll know more about it through him. So I say, do we just get out? We take this priest with us. It might be good leverage for whatever is to happen in the future to have this guy with us. And the two of us leave, taking this priest with us. Later we find out that the door was indeed opened by Raphael himself, and Raphael basically made a choice there. He made a choice to devour, and from this he made a connection with this deity, or whatever it claimed to be. From now on, Raphael could ask one question to the universe each game, and the universe would answer him. And he gracefully offered Ida that if she ever needed to know anything, she could use that as well. We'll see what that brings in the future. But for now, Elodie and Ida return to the Gathering of Kindred with this priest. They put him aside somewhere safe. Once there, I see Rowan and Toledo talking to each other, and I decide that I should talk to Toledo. I go and wait, but they don't really acknowledge me, so I just go around the corner and I come listen in. Rowan, however, spots this and says, you know she's listening in right around the corner, right? After which I know I'm spotted, so I approach them for real. I say I want to talk to Toledo, but he doesn't want to talk to me. Rowan, however, says, yeah, why don't you talk to me? Because I think she noticed that throughout the evening, I had been avoiding her on request of Toledo. Ida actually listened to what Toledo said, and that Ida might be a bad influence on Rowan, and so she had been avoiding Rowan. Toledo agrees that if Ida talks to Rowan first, he will then talk to her. So she does. Rowan and Ida go back inside. Rowan starts laying it on Ida, saying that the reason Rowan had been traveling with Ida is because she had gotten a premonition. It was a premonition of Ida showing her cold and shriveled black heart to Rowan, which told Rowan that Ida was isolating herself and that Ida needed support. This is why Rowan had been traveling with Ida, and sure, Ida had her own reasons for it, but they were disconnected. Rowan only joined Ida because she wanted to, well, learn more about this kindred stuff, but also because she clearly saw that Ida needed someone to support her. Ida clearly needed someone to be her friend. Rowan was upset at Ida that she didn't talk to her about Toledo and all of her feelings, and she asked if I was going to kill her back in that moment with her sire as well, if that was my intention the whole time. She told me that I'm not her mother and that she doesn't need a mother. She had lived an entire adult human life before getting turned into this, so she didn't need someone to take care of her. She could do that herself. And maybe she wanted to do other things. Maybe she wanted to take over the shop that that her sire had, to which I responded, well, if you want that, we can go do that. Like, that's fine. I admit to her that I just took her with me and I've been looking after her all this time because I feel that we were dealt very similar hands of cards and I just wanted her to play hers better than I had gotten to play mine. I say that I'm happy she happened to me and that I kind of recognized myself in her in a way. And I just wanted her to do better than I ever did. She suggests that I should go apologize to Toledo and also congratulate him on the win in that trial that was happening back there because it was a pretty big thing for him and he won it. I say that I will and I ask if there's anything else I can do for her and she says, yeah, give me a hug. So Ida does. And reluctantly and very awkwardly, she gives Rowan a hug before going outside to face Toledo. As I go outside though, Tigurius stops me for a second and he says that he's happy my child is okay, that he heard all about it. I ask him why he cares and he says that it was unfair and that, well, we had his pity, so he did care. He had emotions about the situation. I note to him that, well, apparently even if we're so old as he is, we could still care after all. And that means something to Ida. She has something to think about. He says that he had a fight with his wife, Victoria, and that he's now running in to try and solve things. And I tell him it seems we're in the same boat because I'm just about to do the same thing to my boyfriend. We leave and I approach Toledo. I congratulate him with the trial and I apologize for using him and manipulating him. But I also say that he didn't actually listen to my words. He didn't listen to what I was saying because genuinely in that fight, in that discussion, Ida had good intentions. She wanted to make clear that she actually did feel something for him, that everything up until Atlanta had been fake, but Atlanta had made her feel real things and she just had a bad way of explaining it to him. He asks her if they can give this a real try, if that is what she wants. And instead of trying to respond in some emotionally intelligent way, Ida just says that she wants to kiss him. Toledo asks if it's a distraction again or not, but I say that it is my answer, that I want to try and work and make this a thing, an actual real thing this time. Rowan was listening in on our conversation this whole time, and at that point she makes herself visible and says, "Aw, you guys made up." Rowan and I have a little bit more of a difficulty with that curse in our brain, the choir getting louder, and it makes Rowan confess that she wants to go take care of her dad in New Orleans. We bicker a little back and forth, saying that if her dad did her dirty, that we would next step go to New Orleans and take care of him, and that she should take care of him actually, because that's a good step in her revenge. Toledo doesn't fully agree, but I think we'll figure it out in the meantime. Toledo also starts saying that he wants me to stop diablerizing other people because it changes me, but I say that he should tread lightly on trying to change me because that didn't go well last time I heard that. And I say that I will not stop diablerizing. Again, a conversation topic we will surely pick up in the future. At that moment though, luckily, we finally feel the curse being lifted and the choir stopping in our ears. This is thanks to another group of lovely players who actually solved that plotline. Thank you to you. I go inside for the last few minutes of the night and I see Elodie again. She approaches me with a bottle of blood wine out of thanks for working together on the Ursine Society mission. I check it and I smell it and I ask her if she put anything in it. She says no, but I insight check her enough to know that she didn't do it for me, but she would do it to someone else. She's capable of doing it. I like her spirit and I ask her if she's traveling with anyone else right now, and she says no, apparently she doesn't have a coterie. So I invite her, why don't you come travel with us? Because I apparently do have a thing for adopting 5-year-old Malkavians who I think need my protection. She accepts and she says sure, yeah, that seems fun. So I take her downstairs with me and I go introduce her to Toledo and Rowan and say, well, we're going to travel to New Orleans next. She's coming with us and we'll see where we get from there. And that, my fellow kindred, is how we end Darkness Emergent Atlanta, with already plans made for the future of our dysfunctional family's story. Thank you so much for sticking through this until the end and listening to my entire story. I always have such a blast at these events and I love sharing the story I got to experience with you all. If you liked this video, there are multiple other videos on my channel which you could check out, one of which is my story time on the previous Darkness Emergent in LA that I went to. But until then, stay safe, lovelies, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.